You know what you should do? You should follow me on Twitter at Brommer018. Link in the description. Do it now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another FIFA 20 custom tactics video, the series where I show you how to recreate and adapt real life systems so that they will actually work and replicate as efficiently as possible in FIFA 20. Today we switch our focus on to probably the next most highly suggested tactic that we've got in the comments section in recent times, and that is Mauricio Pochettino's Tottenham team. But in particular, we're going with the 4-2-3-1. Just before we do get into this, I want to quickly go through an announcement that I just recently revealed on the channel, and that is that I've made a second channel called Brommer Ball. This channel will be where I move all real football content over to. This channel will remain for the likes of FIFA and PES and Football Manager, but on that channel we're going to be talking all things football. There'll be tactical deep dives, there'll be reviews and previews of matches, football opinions, got lots of team of the season stuff coming your way very soon, so do go over to that channel and give it a subscribe. Anyway, moving on back to this system, like I say, so we're going to do the 4-2-3-1, and the reason why we're going to do that, there was a few different sort of setups and formations that Tottenham sort of rotated between under Pochettino. They sometimes used the free back, which was also fairly effective. They also used the narrow sort of 4-4-2. It's like a narrow diamond, and that was the one that I was sort of not too keen on. I actually think that was part, not obviously the whole reason, but part of the reason why Pochettino sort of eventually had a bit of a downfall at Tottenham, because they didn't really exploit their advantages in that narrow system. This one, though, was their most effective. We'll particularly look at the sort of 2016 to 2018 era when it was in use, the 4-2-3-1. And so that's what we're sort of going to be going through today. So as you can see, we've got a slightly messy system here. So the reason is, so you want to select the 4-2-3-1 wide. That's the initial thing, and obviously you'll see the positions that you've got there on screen, but we are going to change a couple of things. One thing that we're going to do is we're going to put the fullbacks up to wing backs, and the reason being is that just means that they'll get into more advanced areas, they'll get wider on the pitch, create as much width as possible compared to if they were right and left back, and they'll also get further forward as well. And that's the best way to replicate the system in terms of the fullbacks, because the fullbacks were, you know, extremely attacking, in particular when they had, of course, Kyle Walker at right back, Danny Rose at left back. Their biggest strengths was getting forward, using their pace, using their energy levels, you know, just sort of the bomb up and down the touchline. So with them at wing backs, you can recreate that better. In addition, we also have Heung-min Son here moved up to left wing. So compared to Lo Celso, who would have been the sort of Christian Eriksen role, which we'll talk about a little bit later, he's at right midfield. But with Son at left wing, the reason why we do this is just so he gets into those more advanced areas and penetrates the back line more. Now, you can still do that as a left midfielder, but just not to the extent that a left winger does. A left winger is more advanced in this game. Now, in real life, they're pretty much the same thing. It's a left midfielder or a left winger. They are the same thing. But obviously, in this game, you have to mess around with the positions, just like you do with wing back, in order to replicate that role as best as you possibly can. So that's the in the way of all the position changes that we need to do. Next, we can move on to the tactical instructions. So what we do here is we'll start off with the keeper, and we'll work our way up the field. So first off, we have Hugo Lloris. He's on comes for crosses and sweeper keeper. Sweeper keeper, of course, because they played a high line, and he would very much, you know, sort of be the reinforcement part behind that defensive four, which is, it's essentially just a given now for the majority of modern keepers. They will sweep, they'll be more aggressive, you know, they just help out their back line a bit more. And that's sort of how it works with comes for crosses as well, because, you know, in FIFA particularly, it's fairly hard to sort of defend those situations, such as corners and crosses. So when your keeper comes to crosses, just relieves a little bit of pressure off you. They're fairly overpowered on this game, so you can get away with that. With the centre backs, you don't need to change any of this. Normal interceptions, I did sort of contemplate going with aggressive interceptions, because what you'll have noticed with Mauricio Pochettino sides, particularly with the defensive line there, they're very eager to sort of win the ball. You know, they don't contain as much. They're actually quite aggressive, but you just don't get enough of an upside in game, and that will come through the tactics of constant pressure, which again, you know, we'll talk about very shortly. With the fullbacks, join the attack and overlap. Obviously, that's fairly self-explanatory. As we sort of mentioned, you know, the fullbacks, they create as much width as possible. They get forward into a lot of advanced areas and essentially get into the byline and working from there. So, yeah, both of them will be on join the attack and overlap. Moving on to the two defensive midfielders. So we've got a couple of different roles here. First off, we'll go with the right defensive midfielder. So we've got Eric Dyer here. It was sometimes Eric Dyer, or it could have been sort of like a Victor Wanyama. So what you've got here is, one, you've got cut passing lanes, and that's the same for both of them. So with their press, it would be more of a lane press rather than a sort of man-marking system. So both of them will be on that, and also both of them will be on cover wing as well. So essentially the whole shape just sort of shifts across. So let's say the opposition are attacking down their right-hand side, which would be Spurs' left. Basically, Winks comes out, covers for the wing. Let's say if Son or Sessegnon have committed, and then sort of Dyer shifts across into Winks' space, and then vice versa, coming over to the other side as well. However, there is one slight difference in their roles, as you will have noticed. With attacking support with Dyer, which is the right defensive midfielder, you want this on drop between the defenders. So basically what they'd do is they'd sort of, because of how committed the fullbacks were, how attacking the team is outright, with him dropping between defenders just offers them an extra layer of protection in the back three in terms of people trying to play the ball over the top, because they play at a very high line. And also, in possession, it enables them to play the ball out from the back a little bit more effectively. So he would literally drop between the defensive line, pick up the ball, and then they could sort of go from there. So essentially, everyone is really a piece of the puzzle when working their way up the pitch, going through the thirds. So you have him on drop between the defenders, and you'll sort of see it sort of blends more into a 3/5 back in certain situations, which does just offer you a bit more protection. However, with Harry Winks here, and who pretty much it would have been that role anyway, you've got stay back while attacking, so he's not quite as defensive. He's not going to drop quite as much back. He's going to be more of a possessional pivot, which is obviously where Harry Winks is at his best. People on his channel will know I'm quite a big fan of Harry Winks, and I think he's pretty perfect for this role. You're looking for those sort of deeper lying playmaker type players. Winks is very, very good for this, but also he's got lots of energy. So when they are instigating a press or trying to shift across in their defensive shape with the opposition on the ball, Winks is very good at that. He's got a lot of stamina, a lot of energy levels, decent pace as well for a central defensive midfielder, as well as those sort of technical abilities. So yeah, you have him as stay back while attacking, and he's more of that possessional pivot. So next up, we have got the three attacking midfielders. We will start off with Lo Celso, who would have been Christian Eriksen. And, you know, one thing that Spurs have actually done quite well is identify sort of the similarities between Lo Celso and Eriksen's game. So when Eriksen has left, obviously they've got a kind of a like-for-like replacement. Of course, Lo Celso has a long way to go before he reaches Eriksen's level, because Eriksen is a top player. But there's definitely similarities there in the way that they can play and the positions that they can go in. So you've got him on comeback on defence, and that'll be the same for both wingers. And you've also got him on cut inside, and this is where it sort of complements the support runs, which is going to become short. So obviously Eriksen, despite the fact that he would play out on the right usually, you know, he's a central attack midfielder. He's a central player, and that's how they tried best to sort of get the best out of him. Because obviously you've got the likes of Dele Alli as well. How do you fit both of them into a system? Well, you get Eriksen out on the one wing, on the right-hand side in this case, and he'd just sort of drop inside. He'd sort of come inside and then pick up the ball in more central areas. But again, he could still drift wide when needed to. So they've still got that sort of element of width because he's got a lot of energy levels. You know, he's not really pacey, but he's not slow either. So say if this was someone, you know, think of another 10 in the Premier League, so maybe like a David Silva. You know, he's quite a bit slower. He's not quite as athletic as someone like a Christian Eriksen. So I don't think he'd be as effective. Whereas with Eriksen, because he's got, you know, just sort of a higher physical upside, it enables you to do this. So whilst he's at right midfield, can have him on come short and cut inside, and then, you know, it enables you to get him in those central areas a bit more, and he can work his way, help Spurs work their way through the thirds. With support on crosses, we've also got this on stay on the edge of the box for the crosses as well. So whilst it is like this, and you will see in the gameplay a couple of times, Lo Celso does occasionally get into the box when there's a crossing situation, because what we do is we have tactics on up to 6, and I'll show you this shortly, which is where 3 players get into the box. So say if Ali or someone, maybe Son, has dropped deep or is crossing in the ball, you know, it just sort of fills in that role. So whilst it is generally staying on the edge of the box, he's able to pick up the ball, loose balls here and there. He's able to recycle possession more. He's also at his best sort of creating chances from those areas. You know, it's not a black and white sort of thing. So yeah, stay on the edge of the box for crosses there, and that sort of rounds off sort of Lo Celso's or / Christian Eriksen's role there. Meanwhile, on the left-hand side, we have a slightly different role. Heung-min Son, of course, so he's still on comeback on defence, and he's also on cut inside as well. So what I forgot to mention for the Eriksen role, what I can talk about here, they both cut inside. Part of the reason is for the fact that you're making space for the overlapping fullbacks. So with them creating the width, it then means that the wingers and the wide men can sort of come inside a little bit more, and then offer those central areas as well. So you're not sort of overcrowded or too vacant, so to speak, in those central areas. So with Son on cut inside, as well as Lo Celso, you know, you can have that. But with support runs, we've got him on getting behind. So of course, he's the winger who's trying to penetrate the back lines, and this is part of the reason why we've got him up to left wing rather than as a left midfielder, just so he gets into those more advanced areas more often and more efficiently, and therefore he's playing on the last line a whole lot more, so it sort of helps him to instigate those runs. He's going to be easier for you to penetrate in behind. And again, if you have been sort of glancing at the gameplay on the right hand side, you know, occasionally, we all notice that we do try and utilise that to advantage. We try and use Son's pace to get in behind, and then the team can go that way. In fact, we create a fair few chances through that situation. So it's very, very handy indeed. And finally, on support and crosses, get into the box of crosses as well. He'll be sort of just helping out the likes of Ali and Kane, you know, in those sort of crossing situations. So that's it for the wingers. Next up with Dele Alli. He's also on comeback on defence. It's only Kane who's going to be staying forward, and we'll come on to that shortly. The rest of the team will form back into their defensive shape. But again, because you've just got a constant, real, extreme gegenpressing system, you know, there shouldn't be that sort of detrimental for him to come back on defence, because of the fact that a lot of the time Spurs should be in possession of the ball, or they should be winning it higher up the field. But we'll have him on comeback on defence anyway. And support on crosses, we have him on get into the box of crosses as well. So, you know, everyone sort of knows how Dele Alli plays. He's essentially a second striker. So, you know, in order to get the best out of him, you get him into the box of crosses. He's a poacher. He does, of course, score in this game on the right hand side as well. You know, because that's where he's at his best. You know, being a second goal threat, getting into those advanced areas. You know, putting more stress onto the defence in those crossing situations, in those build-up play. So, you know, with Ali, that's pretty self-explanatory. That's how you get the best out of him, by, you know, get him into those crossing situations, get him into the box more, and being in those more shooting situations. So that's it for the attacking midfield. Finally, we have the big man up top, Harry Kane. So with support runs, he's on stay central. You don't really want him drifting out wide too much. Now, of course, he will sort of alter his runs a little bit, and he'll sort of switch the position where he's occasionally he runs in behind, or he picks up a position, but that doesn't mean he'll be coming out to the byline, etc., because it's just not where you want him, is it? Obviously, you want him in those central areas, in between the posts, you know, and playing up to his strengths, which is scoring goals and getting in the best positions. So, with that, stay central. But then moving on to attacking runs, we have him as the target man. So, you know, Kane is a really balanced kind of striker. You know, he doesn't have blistering pace, but he's not extremely slow either. He can run in behind, and we've seen him do that many times. In fact, you'd have seen him do it a couple of times in this game as well. He can get in behind, but also plenty of times we've seen him drop off and become a false nine, you know, sort of, and then the wingers run on behind, Ali runs in behind. There's one goal, I remember it was a great example of this where they scored against Arsenal in the League Cup when Kane drops off into his own half, plays a 40, 50, 60 yard pass to Dele Alli, who's running in behind, through on goal, and then they score from it. And so, you know, obviously he can do that as well, but because he's so varied, the best way to really look at this is to put him as a target man, and that's how you'll see in the gameplay on the right hand side how it best uses it, because then as a target man he's not always trying to penetrate the last man. He can occasionally do it, and also you can instigate that by pressing L, B and A, but also it means that he'll be looking for the ball played into his feet, and then you can play off him from there. You can get runners in and around him, and then you can go from there. So he's not dropping off too deep so that he won't be in those you know, real advanced areas and those best goal scoring positions, but also he's not constantly trying to penetrate the back line. You know, we'll do a bit of everything, and that's how you can get the best out of him as a target man rather than mixed attack, which just sort of doesn't seem to have the same impact. So that's it for the player instructions. As always, and I'll say this again at the end of the video, do get any questions in to me. Should you need them, I should also mention stay forward on defensive support as well, finally, because I forget to mention that in the last video. Yeah, like I say, if you got any questions about that, do get back at me. Now we'll move on to the tactics. So with defensive style, we've got this on constant pressure. Now, something that I sort of talked about over the last couple of years is obviously Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool team were always seen as the sort of dominant, you know, extreme gegenpressing team. But actually, I think Tottenham were the actual most extreme pressing team in the division during the sort of Pochettino days. I think their press was just relentless. It was just constant. They expended so much energy into those areas. And that was one of the things that was so exciting to sort of watch about them, because they were so entertaining, because it was just such a high tempo, constantly 24/7. So you want that on constant pressure. And then on defensive whip, we have this on free. You know, you'll rarely see in any of these tactics videos me with a team that has a wide defensive system. It just makes no sense whatsoever to me, because obviously if you become too wide, teams are just going to be able to play through you, whereas if you go narrow, teams have got to try and play around, and it's harder to score. They've got to whip more balls in, and then your centre backs, you know, can mop that up should they be you know, should they be good at the air and stuff and commanding. So, you know, we have this on free. And then you've got a nice narrow defensive system there. And with depth, we moved this up to 8. So obviously, really, this should be 10 because their defensive line was just as high as possible. Now, the reason we just have this on 8 is just to adapt it for the gameplay's sake. It's a lot easier for people to sort of run in behind, particularly if you're playing online. Obviously, you can only do it on seasons with this system because you've changed for positions. But you know, obviously people like to exploit that sort of ball over the top, you know, and get a pacey player running in behind. When you lower this to 8, you've still got a high line, but obviously you've dropped it off a little bit. So it just gives you a little bit more leeway, a little bit more protection. With 10, it's just a little bit too easy to exploit. Whereas 8, you can still sort of help you complement that gegenpress and keep you with that high defensive line and maintain control of the game. Moving on to the offensive style now, we have possession. You know, I don't really need to explain this too much. You know, it's Tottenham and it's Pochettino, so you know we all know how they sort of played there. With offensive width, now we've got this on free as well, and the reason being is that you know you try and want to complement the fact that the wing backs will create the width anyway. Even if you're on free, because they're wing backs, they'll get as wide as possible. They'll be essentially on the touchline. But then also you've got the likes of Lo Celso or Ericsson, it would have been in this tactic, coming narrower, you know, coming in those more central positions, asking for the ball a lot closer to the player in possession, basically, and then it just enables you to sort of complement that possession-based style, short passing, and work your way through the thirds that way. Whereas if you got it on, you know, 10, everyone's too far apart. And then it's a lot easier for the opposition to, you know, just intercept the ball. So with that on free, that's the best way you can get it there. Players in the box, we did mention this earlier, we got this on 6, so you should have roughly 3 to players in the box for crossing situations. Of course, you may occasionally have more. Tactics are never ever set in stone, particularly these systems. There's always tweaks and stuff in games, in situations, but generally you've got 3 in the box. And finally, with corners and free kicks, what we always do in these videos is we move them up to 4. That way you'll still have 2 men back and then 1 man outside on the edge of the area as well, which gives you a lot of protection for the counter attack, but you've got an extra target or 2 in the box, just because it's fairly hard to score corners and wide free kicks on this game. So that rounds it off for this tactic then, guys. I hope you have enjoyed this video. As always, if you've got any questions, like I said earlier, please do let me know. Don't be scared to get at me in the comment section, and I'll do my best to get back to you. As I mentioned at the start of the video, got a second channel, Ball, so please go and subscribe to that as well. Show me a bit of support there. If you want to see lots of regular football, real life football content, then that is the channel for you. Please keep getting your suggestions into me. A lot of people keep spamming the same things. Don't worry, guys, they're all on the list. But if you've got any new suggestions, then I would really appreciate that. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already for more regular gaming content from the likes of FIFA. And also leave a like on the video as well if you've enjoyed it. On that note, we are going to finish off there. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.